Ecological dynamics in sports operates off of the reflection of light. The soccer ball is reflecting light. That reflection of light goes to your retina. So your visual perception from your eye, as the ball travels towards you, the reflection gets bigger, coupling physical actions to the reflection of light. We'll call that the soccer ball real information. And everything that you need is in that environment. All the real information is there. You just have to know where to search, where to attune your vision to get the information that is important. If this player is going to dribble at a cone or through cones, they're actually coupling their physical actions to cones that are stationary. There's no real information there. So instead of cones, what if we have a player who is trying to tag the other player who is dribbling? Now that's going to force the dribbling player to change direction, to change speed, to adapt the technique. So it's very game representative. It's much more game representative than dribbling around cones. Cones don't move. Just like Bruce Lee, we said boards don't hit back. You want to get as close to the real information as possible. And one of the reasons we want to get as close to the real information as possible is how, when we say the environment has all the information we need, how is an athlete supposed to search for information if the information isn't real? There's a lot of vocabulary that we as coaches might not be familiar with, but it's going to help a lot in our understanding of academic theory and how to apply it to practice session design. So basically, an affordance is, what is your ability for action? It's very hard to understand what the ability for action of each and every player is in every moment of the game. Perception is mostly visual perception. There are going to be some exceptions that I'll talk to you about later. But for right now, when the athlete perceives the environment, which is information rich, it's visual perception. Now, the athlete is going to search for opportunities for action. Now, based on what their abilities are, is going to direct their search. We're also going to say, what are the players attuned to? So the information is there, but are they looking in the right spot? Now, there's a climbing wall here in this slide. And if an athlete has great grip strength, they are going to perceive that wall to climb up it using hand grips. Where can I climb? What is the path? Because I have great grip strength for me to use my hands. Look at the chain above it. That's called a constraint. A constraint can take away certain things from people while it opens up other things. Constraints can alter your search. They can change your perception and what you're attuned to, and they'll change your action capabilities, your affordances. If I was going to give the mountain climber in this example mittens, so I put mittens on your hand, and maybe the mittens are huge and you can't have any grip strength really. Maybe it reduces your grip strength by 90%. Now that mountain climber is going to perceive a different path up the wall. Their visual search is going to be different because now they have to use leg holds. They need to look for places where their feet could grip and their hands, they can't depend on them like they did. So by constraining this, you've changed perception, you've changed search patterns, something that's called a knowledge base. So if I played the game for 5 years, I have a certain knowledge base, and you can see on the top of my sport that somebody else maybe doesn't have. However, when I'm in the game, I am not accessing my past memories. I am not accessing past patterns. I am in a real current feedback loop with the environment. Cognition, which is the processing of information and decision making, that is not a separate step. That is already baked into the equation. It is now. The athlete is in a real-time feedback loop with the environment. Your actions are based upon your perceptions and what you perceive. So if you perceive that there is an invitation for actions, so, hey, listen, there's a chance for me to get through this space, I'm going to run through that space because that's the invitation for actions. Now, affordances, we'll call that an affordance. They open and close very quickly in these games. So that is action. You can change your intention. So if you say, hey, I'm going to pass this ball between the two defenders, but the next thing the defender shifts over slightly, you are in a real-time feedback loop and your intentions can change very quickly in real time. And perception, visual search, because your perception and your search and what you're attuned to lead towards the actions that you take. And your actions you take are in real time, and you can change your intentions, which change your actions, obviously, in real time. Pirlo is a famous Italian soccer player. He's probably one of the best passers of the ball of all time from the number 6 position. And he says, I've reached one conclusion. Though I think I've understood that there is a secret, I perceive the game in a different way. Notice he probably doesn't know anything about ecological dynamics, but he's saying he perceives the game in a different way. It's a question of viewpoints, of having a wide field of vision. That's his search, being able to see the bigger picture. He's attuned to more things. Your classic midfielder looks down and sees the forwards. Basically saying, the normal midfielder looks down the field and looks for the person to pass to. He says, I'll focus instead on the space between me and them and where I can work the ball through. His perception is different than the person who's just looking at the player to pass to the player. He's looking at the space. We can call that a perceived affordance, where he can play the ball through, and that now becomes a shared affordance. When you are constrained over time with constraints, new affordances can begin to emerge over time. So I'm going to give you an example of the architect below. This is a true story. So he lost his sight and he became a better architect because he would tap his walking stick and he could hear the sounds echo off the rooms and the buildings he was in. And it would tell him, sound would tell him exactly what that room was and how it was engineered. And he said he became a better architect blind than he was when he had eyesight. So really, his search and his feedback and his information was auditory. You look at the tennis player, there's all kinds of articles on losing your hearing, but in tennis, the sound of the ball coming off the racket is what we would call predictive information. It can tell you, did they hit it with topspin? Did they slice the ball with backspin? It tells you a lot. And they say you can even get an idea when they hit the ball based on the sound before even visual perception. So there was a deaf tennis player who they said could never reach a high level because they're missing the sound component. And it just wasn't true. And they adapted and picked up on other information. So their search patterns adjusted. They became attuned to information that somebody who could hear would not have become attuned to. Goggles I made that restrict peripheral vision, so it forces more scanning, more head movement. I've tried headphones that block out all sound. These are things, though, that would need to be done over time, over a long period of time, to develop those other elements of perception. And then you would become more attuned, and your search patterns would be a little bit constraints. The constraint is something that takes an option away while other options can open up. In a sports context, in an invasion sports game context, let's just think of it as you can teach tactics by constraining, you can teach game intelligence by constraining, and you can even enhance technique by constraining. Listen, it's not about the coach, it's not about verbal feedback. It's what's around your head, not what's in your head. These are unique environments, and those environments can get players better and give them unique skill sets that they would have never gotten anywhere else. It's the environment that is the number one thing to develop players over any sort of coaching or verbal feedback. From representative game design, because this really, if we go back to perception, visual perception, and you are searching, right? Visual search of the environment for real information to decide, well, for real information, and that will show you where your affordances are in real time. What are your abilities for action? What is the environment, the other team affording you for action so you can score a goal or you can win the ball back? You had a football player speed ladder, track person speed ladder. You got hurdles, you got cones, you got football players not engaged with each other, and you have hockey players skating through cones, and this boxer just hitting it back. Is that representative of the real game? Are they coupling their physical actions to real information that they would get in the real game? My answer is absolutely not. The more game representative the environment is, which is, does it look like the game, right? The more information rich the environment will be, where players can start to learn to pick up these invitations for actions. At least it's close enough, it's representative enough to the real game. And for me, invasion games, it's about two things. I'm going to go over this later with you too, but it's about exploiting space and time to score a goal and shutting down space and time to win the ball back and deny the other team a scoring opportunity. Those are the only two principles there are in invasion games. In soccer or basketball, you have to keep the ball, right? So if your exercise is about keeping the ball, is that representative enough? Are you exploiting space and time even though you don't have a way to score? In my mind, yes, it's enough. Opposed is, are you playing against a live defender? It's better in invasion games. You have four phases of the game. Right when you win the ball back, we'll call that attacking transition. As you keep the ball, you set your players up in a way where you can move the ball freely to get a chance to score. We'll call that attacking organization. When you lose the ball, defensive transition, and then eventually you want to get into a defensive organization so it's harder for the other team to penetrate and score. In opposed training, all those things can happen. You are coupling your physical actions to real information. There are real decisions to be made. And that is very, very important. There's nothing isolated in that. There's nothing unrealistic. There's no cones that you're coupling your actions to cones. This is real. Now, you look here, unopposed. These guys are passing the ball through mannequins, and there's a predictable, predetermined outcome. If you're going to have your kid, or if you're going to learn how to drive in New York City, it's insane. You have all these people cutting you off and cab drivers and this, and it's nuts. Are you going to take out all that and practice in a parking lot with some cones and then expect to get into rush hour in New York City and to be able to handle it? No way. You haven't coupled real information to your physical actions. It's overwhelming. Never mind, you haven't duplicated the energy level, you haven't duplicated the pressure, the stress. That's even outside of practice session design. Those things are very, very important. So people often say, listen, how can a kid learn technique, how to learn to dribble, how to learn to pass, how to do these things in a chaotic game that's invasion sports? Random, unpredictable, chaotic. Well, it is not as random and chaotic as you think, because there are rules and boundaries. In basketball, you can't kick the ball. In soccer, you can't pick it up with your hands. There are boundaries. There's actual physical boundaries. There's everything. So there are limitations to the chaos. But you absolutely can get better at passing and dribbling in the real chaos. So to think that we have to take you out and isolate you and teach the game in little separate pieces, that's a disservice. And I want you to think about that when you have the basketball coach who's doing unopposed layup drills, when you're having basketball team doing a three-man weave. When is the last time you ever saw a three-man weave actually in a game? They're coupling nothing. They're not coupling their physical actions to real information. It's not. They're not having to adjust. When you're doing a layup and nobody's there, are you adjusting and coming up with a solution to somebody jumping at you? No. There's no variability. Variability is massive in gaining game intelligence and making better decisions. What I'm getting towards here is everything needs to be in the whole. The surfer surfs the wave. The wave is the real information. That is the feedback loop. That is the whole. Is the surfer going to get any benefit out of standing on a surfboard on the beach and doing drills? No, not at all. Not one bit. You can constrain the surfer and say, listen, I want you to tilt your right foot in, take it 2 inches back, and I want you to try to ride the wave like that. Okay, now he's coupling real information, right, to physical actions that are constrained, and he has to adapt his movement solutions. Great. It's real. It's the whole. Surfboard on the beach, standing on it, in my opinion, it does very little to nothing. There are some cases where, hey, you can't get real. You're working with a goalkeeper and there's no other teammates. But can you make it game representative, more game representative? So instead of saying, hey, we're doing a collapse dive to the right, can you not tell them if it's going to the right or the left? Can you actually not kick a stationary ball? Can you kick it off the dribble? Now they don't know right, left, or when it's going to be kicked because you're kicking it off the dribble. Now it's becoming more game representative. And the more game representative you can make things, the better for the athlete. There's 6 things that you got to ask yourself. Is the information game-like? We just went over that. So important. Otherwise, you're coupling physical actions to cones. Does it require players to make meaningful decisions? Meaningful decisions can only be made with meaningful information. Do players need to adapt their attentions, their intentions? Defender goes right, I can't go right, I need to go the other way. Great. Adapting intentions. Doesn't happen in unopposed. It happens in opposed. Does the player obviously adapt movement solutions? With a real defender, they do. Are the tasks dynamic and real? And does the environment, does it create pressure and emotion like it would in a game? These are massive, massive things to consider. I need a coach to teach my kid how to pass the ball. I need a coach to teach. You don't. The environment creates a feedback loop with the player. And through that interaction between the player and the environment, if you play in enough diverse environments, your skill sets are going to go through the roof. You are going to be able to adapt your skill sets. You are going to create new, unique skill sets. And just so you know, those are transferable. In soccer, they're transferable to the 11v11 game on grass. Donor sports, like I gave you the example of futsal, like American arena football. Come on, arena football, you're in a tiny space, less players, you have to release the ball because the pressure is coming. Not only did it create quarterbacks who can get rid of the ball quicker, it created a new coaching strategy, new play calling that got adopted into the regular NFL. So, did arena football transfer skill sets and coaching tactics to the regular game? Absolutely. The same thing with box lacrosse. They say you could see anybody who trained in box lacrosse, which is normally in Canada in a small rink um, with smaller goals, they become so technical and so good with the stick. They know that's where that kid developed was in box lacrosse. So there's a lot of donor sports. The American ice hockey team often didn't have time space to warm up on the ice, so they would play American soccer outside of the rink as their warm up because it's an invasion sport. I remember going and interviewing one of the top Aikido instructors in New York City, and they just said, "Yeah, we do the same things every day. This is what we do." I said, "Same things. Where's the variability?" They said, "Well, we switch partners every 5 minutes, and each partner is a different body type." There's your variability right there. Now you can quantify your practice sessions. You can go back if you want to video them and see what was my real decision making ratios. How many of these things in practice did my kids do layup drills? Did they do, isolated technical skills that are predictable? What was the ratio of that? How much time did they spend in unpredictable, unstable, variable environments where it's real information? How much is that? Because that's important. That's the important one. The coach, if you have these great environments, and it's not easy to create great environments where kids are having maximum meaningful decisions on and off the ball, because you have to get it right. How many players did you have? How many showed up for practice? You have to say, what is the ability level of the kids? Maybe your training was planned and you didn't have that planned out, and you have 4 kids whose ability is much lower and 8 kids is much higher. How are you going to deal with that? So for me, can you create these great environments with all these outside influences that you have to put together in the moment? And are you gonna, once you create the environment, you basically just have to guide the players. You have to get the players attuned. What are they searching for? And then guide them. Do you really need these detailed verbal instructions of this feedback that goes on and on? In my opinion, you do not.